Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third episode of the Ark Podcast. We've got not only a phenomenal panel, but a crazy amount of news coming up. Just briefly, obviously the headline story is Julian Assange is about to land within the next hour in Canberra, in Australia, after many years being stuck overseas. He signed a plea deal with the US government recently, which we're going to go through. The second thing is experts have advised that milk is racist and colonial. The Governor-General receives a well-earned pay rise and she hasn't even started the job. The British establishment piles on Nigel as he makes headway. Wikipedia links right-wing pages to fear, anger and disgust, whereas left-wing pages are linked to joy, rainbows and ponies. Birds of a feather flock together. Matt Kean finds a friend in Albanese. I know Craig's going to enjoy talking about that one. Jordan Peterson blows the whistle on the climate worshippers. Donald Trump is set to announce his vice president pick at this Friday's CNN debate with Joe Biden. Obama fears Biden will lose election and is involving himself more in the election, that's Obama. And we could see prison time be done virtually. And the last thing is Argentina hits their first week without inflation. Why can't Aussies enjoy the same? I hope we can get through all of this. As I said, Julian Assange, he is landing. We will be bringing it up right when it happens. This is our first live stream. But let me introduce our guests. On the my far right, we've got Craig Kelly, who's obviously the federal leader of One Nation's campaign director. I'm pleased to have Craig back again. I've got Natalie Duma, also on my right, who is a former UAP candidate, former Libertarian candidate, and a dentist, a phenomenally intelligent person on the actual issues we're talking about. As you've seen every week, Natalie's been here.
Hello again.
On my left, I've got Dr. Stephen Shavura, a Sky News commentator, contributor, as well as a doctor and a professor at Campion College, where he presents about history and Australian history specifically, and Christianity. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited to get into this show. You can ask the panelists. I was laughing my head off putting the sources into this stuff. You couldn't make this stuff up. But before I get started, I just wanted to let you guys know, firstly, there's our gold sponsor who's sponsoring this particular show, and our guests here are all taking home some silver. As Good as Gold, who have actually minted their very own coin, which is the Freedom Coin. This is a really awesome product. These guys are phenomenal. They've backed us in everything. If you head to As Good as Gold Australia, they have on their website a referral section. Let them know that we've sent you. And the last thing I'll say is if you want to click the link in the description, we've got PayPal. If you want to sign up as a regular member to make sure that these shows keep getting out there and we're not controlled by social media, please do. First and foremost, we've got to start with our priority in terms of stories. Experts are now asking whether milk is racist as part of a taxpayer-funded research project into connections between milk and colonialism. The details on this, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Stephen, in a sec. A taxpayer-funded project is set to research this link. Academics from Oxford Museum will research politics nature of milk and its colonial legacies. One of the experts involved has previously argued that milk is a Northern European obsession that has been imposed on other parts of the world. Dr. Joanna Zetterstrom-Sharp, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, said the assumption that milk was a key part of the human diet may be understood as a white supremacist one, as many populations outside Europe and North America have high levels of lactose intolerance in adulthood. The new project, Milking It, Colonialism, Heritage and Everyday Engagement with Dairy, has won funding from the Arts and Humanities Research Council. Stephen, have you heard of anything like this before?
No, but I've heard of things, I guess, equally ridiculous, but of a different nature. But I mean, this is just an example of a lot of modern scholarship. It's called critical race theory, post-colonial studies, and the basic idea is that they go through Western history, they go through everything that's pretty much going on in any Western society today, and they try to find ways in which it is racist. And so that can range from the words, some of them, the words that we use, the way that we the number of meals that we eat, the clothes that we wear, and here apparently milk. And the argument, yes, seems to be that only in the West is milk some sort of great preoccupation. Well, maybe, but that doesn't sort of mean that it's spreading around the world is some sort of racist agenda. I'm actually reminded in the Old Testament, the Jews, when they sort of idealized the land of Zion, they saw it as the land of milk and honey.
And honey, yeah.
And that was Eastern. So
Hang on a second. Do we not breastfeed our children, like the whole of humanity? So we want to say that every mother, and I am a mother, is racist or colonial? I'm really confused. And then what are you going to tell a kid who's eating a milk bottle that's white? Yeah. I mean, that's a lolly. Is that racist too? I'm really confused as to where we're going with this. Cheese, racist. Anything else? What have I missed? Chalk?
Well, the thing is, in university, the way universities are structured is that basically the life of an academic now is about getting research grants. It's about attracting money to yourself, to your department. And there are certain buzzwords in universities that attract a lot of money. So one of them is sustainability and climate change. But other buzzwords are like racism, neo-colonialism, diversity, equity, inclusion. And so any project that sort of attaches itself to those buzzwords can attract an awful lot of money. And it creates perverse incentives in universities for people to come up with moronic projects like this, basically so they can attract government funding. And when you attract government funding, that means you go from lecturer to senior lecturer, from senior lecturer to professor. So it's a perverse monetary incentive behind all of this, because again, sort of the purse strings of research all around the world are largely being controlled by people who, if they haven't completely ideologically bought in to wokeism, they're too cowardly actually to resist it. And so consequently you get all these waste of money projects that the public pays for.
Well, that's it. It's our hard-earned tax dollars. It's crazy. And I'm sorry, as a mother, I take great offence to that.
Craig, what do you think about this?
Well, Joel, we've got something similar. This, I think, is from the UK. We've got something very similar here. It's the Australia Research Council grants. Yeah. And they come out every year. And I used to have great fun in Parliament going through these just absurd waste of money sort of thing that they did. Yeah. And you're right, climate change was the buzzword. You have to put sort of climate change in there sort of thing. Maybe we should at another sort of night go through the list of those Australia Council grants awards and see how similar things are being wasted money here in Australia. But just getting back to the dairy, remember what happens to the cows under net zero? They'll have to be culled.
Yeah.
You can't have, if you want net zero, the basically dairy industry that we have today has to be destroyed.
What is it? A quarter of our emissions come from livestock in Australia?
It's about I think about 13, 14, 15%, depends how you measure it. But remember, it's not from the machinery, it's not the tractor in the paddock or the machinery in the shed. Animals. It's from the farts and the burps of the animals.
Yeah.
Now there's some weird...
But not humans.
So there's some weird plan that you can give the animals some seaweed tablet and reduces their farting and burping, but it's only a small reduction.
Yeah.
So ultimately, if we are going to go down this net zero path, there will come a time, and it'll be very near future, of how we've got to start culling our herds, how milk and dairy will be off the menu.
It's funny you should say that, because I remember back a while ago looking at kangaroo meat, and they said we can't do kangaroo meat in mass, even though it's semi-comparable to cows, because they do 3 times the amount of farts and methane production. I was like, well, isn't that interesting, with regards to that? But no.
Who measures that? Have you ever asked yourself, is there someone sitting there in a university going, let's measure cow farts or kangaroo farts? Sorry, but do they have nothing better to do? There's so many problems in the world, and yet we're going down this pathway of let's get rid of milk and cows.
Yeah. And all being engineered from above by faceless, nameless technocrats who no one ever elected in. Yeah. Trying to make radical changes to aspects of society that deeply affect every individual person. These aren't just sort of cosmetic changes here and there. They want to control what we eat, how we grow our food, whether we can keep our own chickens. I mean, we've sort of, this is just a classic example of the fact that we're barely a democracy anymore. We're really a technocracy with a kind of thin democratic cloak over us. And no one even knows who the heck these people are behind the scenes making the decisions.
The cabal.
Yeah.
Cabal.
Oh, with so many names.
It's ridiculous. Speaking of the cabal, we saw a situation where the breaking news is that Julian Assange has basically been allowed to do a plea deal with the American government. He didn't trust them enough to go all the way to America. So he did it around the corner. Who is Julian Assange, by the way, for those of you that, I don't know, been living under a rock, or maybe, who knows, maybe you just started following politics and you're 18 years old right now. The CIA were quite exposed, and a number of intelligence agencies were exposed from the WikiLeaks, which is an organization Julian Assange runs. He released 500,000 US cables showing very confidential documents from the US and showing exactly what America was doing in the Iraq War, what triggered it, what it actually exposed a lot of military personnel to potential backlash from what was going on. But he also highlighted the fact that in this particular story from the Express, the CIA was actually created by the US, the ISIS rather was created by the US. It was quite interesting because we saw Assange released. He's been actually, again, guys, this is a developing story, which is why I wanted to go live today. This is happening very, very quickly. But essentially what's happened is he's taken this plea deal and he's on his way back to Australia now, to Canberra, to meet with his father, meet with his family, who he hasn't seen in a very long time. But he signed this plea deal. The timing of this is very questionable. Some are saying, like I've heard Tim Pool say, that this is probably happening because they want to basically phase the Biden administration. Don't think they're actually going to win this upcoming presidential election, which is a big call, and they would much rather tie this up now. And this is what this article actually goes through. They want to bar Julian Assange from getting back into America without permission, and obviously the bureaucrats will manage that, and the CIA and the FBI. But this particular, so he's on his way right now, and will be landing in Canberra in about half an hour. So we're all very eager to see him flying back from Saipan. Stephen, you made the point that, yep, look, Julian, I respect the fact that he's coming here. He better start wearing a suicide-proof vest. The Clintons don't forgive and forget. You've taken a slightly different approach to perhaps the libertarian view that Julian exposed war crimes, and you wrote a very big thread, which I didn't include in here. But what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of Julian Assange, and I never have been. Now, when they started dropping a bunch of things about the Clintons and their campaign in around 2016, I became ambivalent about him. That is, I kind of liked him, but at the same time, you see, here's the thing. So the paradigm case of leaking information is the Daniel Ellsberg case of 1971, where Daniel Ellsberg, an American man who was a great American patriot, had joined the army, a brilliant economist, PhD from Harvard, academic, went and worked basically in American intelligence. And his job was to figure out what was going wrong in America in Vietnam. And he basically, with other people, put together 7,000 pages going through every decision the Americans made in Vietnam, showing what they did wrong and how it could go better. And what he found, to his frustration, was that no one was paying any attention to any of this. America was in a war. It was losing men. And so what he did was he leaked that 7,000 pages that he himself carefully put together over years. He leaked it to the media. And the New York Times started going through it and publishing bits of it with editorial comments. If Julian Assange had done something like that, I would feel a lot better about him. But what Julian Assange did was see to it that hundreds and hundreds of thousands, just in 2010, around about 750,000 documents, so goodness knows how many millions of pages, on classified military issues and diplomatic cables were all put out there in the public, things that he hadn't read, because you can't go through and black out names of people in 750,000 documents. He basically just saw to it that it was all put out there for anyone to see, not because he had any deep concerns about America, but because he basically hated America, he hates governments, and people's names were revealed. He didn't check to see, for example, if any informants' names were going to be revealed there. He didn't check to see if the names of any spies were in these documents. He just put it all out there without even reading it. And so I see Julian Assange as a very, very reckless, self-serving man. Now, some good things came out of it, no doubt. But just because some good things come out of something that you do doesn't mean that you did it in the right way and that what you did was the right thing to do. No one would want what Julian Assange did to be the rule. No one would want someone, when they feel that a government is illegitimate, and Julian Assange basically feels that all governments are illegitimate, he's pretty much an anarchist, no one would want people like that just dumping hundreds of thousands of documents out there for anyone to see because they don't believe government should have any secrets. Well, the Associated Press, not a right-wing media corporation, in 2016 they went through many of the WikiLeaks files, found that there were all sorts of very private information in them with names that weren't redacted. Women who had been raped, their names were put out there. A man who was charged with homosexuality in Saudi Arabia, his address, his name, his telephone number was in these documents, unredacted, all out there. What Julian Assange did was very reckless. I think he did the wrong thing, and I'm not a fan of this guy.
Right. Craig, what did you think? What do you think?
Look, I think that there's been a real turnaround in the public perception of this.
Right.
Especially if we go back to the start of the Iraq War, I think most of us were supporting of America. We thought America was doing the right thing. But we've seen through what Assange leaked out that they weren't. And that has really damaged America's reputation, and probably right. And what we've seen, especially during the COVID era, where the government is lying to us repeatedly, right, for their own advantage and for big corporations' advantages. That's where I think the public perception has turned around. There should be more transparency on what government is doing, not less. I think that's why Assange has the majority support of Australians. He's been locked up for a long time. Look, and I'm glad to say I got to know his father, John Shipton. We spent some time together at some of the over in Perth there, and I got to meet him and talk with him. Look, and I'm glad that he's finally home. He would not have been able to get a fair trial, especially what we've seen with what they did to President Trump and are still doing to President Trump. You cannot get a fair trial in the US. So he shouldn't have been extradited to a country where you can't be guaranteed a fair trial. And sadly, that is the state of the American courts at the moment. So for that reason alone, I think, glad that he's back.
Yeah, Natalie?
Well, I think, look, Stephen, you have a point. You've got a very valid point. I do agree with some of the things. But the thing is, does the crime fit the actual punishment? And I do believe that the freedom of the press there isn't any. And we know with the Trusted News Initiative and the kind of rubbish that we are actually fed, and that journalism is very, very scared in revealing a lot of the things that are supposed to be really revealed and should be revealed. We now do know that America went into Iraq. We know Afghanistan probably shouldn't have happened. And America's been in a lot of wars where perhaps they shouldn't have been. And the other thing is, yes, the Clintons were actually exposed, which is a wonderful thing. And I know,
agree.
Gateway Pundit revealed that Hillary Clinton was heard as saying, "Why don't we just drone Julian Assange?" And then when she was asked by a reporter years later, and that was actually in 2016, years later she was asked by a reporter and she basically said, "I don't recall." So when you don't recall, does that mean you didn't say it? It's really quite disturbing when people like the Clintons have a lot of people dropping dead who go against them, like, they disappear or commit suicide or hang themselves or whatever else have you. I just don't think that his crime deserved the punishment he got. And I'm glad that there was a documentary like The Trust Fall, which I did see, which I think was a very good documentary, which helped to bring his plight to the world. And the more people that know about things that are going on in the world, the better for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I have no objections to him being released, and I sort of took no joy in him being incarcerated, particularly in that particular prison. It's just what really I find a bit dismaying is the hagiography around this guy. He is basically now Saint Julian. And I think when you look at the full picture, I don't think that really makes a whole lot of sense. So again, I think sort of the paradigm case that everyone kind of goes back to is Daniel Ellsberg, who was very surgical about what he did. Like, he didn't just think, the US shouldn't be in Vietnam. I'm going to release hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of military documents completely indiscriminately, not redact names, and basically just cause chaos to the American system. That was not his response. He saw a problem. America wasn't learning. He had a document teaching America every step where it had gone wrong. The man was a genius, and he was a highly educated genius. Assange probably has a genius IQ, but he has in no ways, doesn't seem in any way to have sort of disciplined his mind through proper study. This guy had. And so he released this document. He knew what was in it. It was surgical. It was targeted to a particular issue. So what Assange did and what Daniel Ellsberg did are two very different things. And to my way of thinking, we need to talk about the two cases very differently. But having said that, he's free. And that's fine. I have no problem with that. But again, I don't know that you want a lot of. Do we want more Daniel Ellsbergs? Sure. It would have been nice to have a Daniel Ellsberg
Absolutely.
during COVID. But did you want someone who was so angry at the Australian government during COVID? How would you have felt if they decided, I'm just going to release hundreds of thousands of documents indiscriminately showing people's medical records?
Interestingly, neither option worked to teach any government anything.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, the argument there would be that you should never do it then.
Oh, no.
That would be the.
I'm not making that as an argument. I just think that when you've got a government, it didn't matter who released what. The governments aren't paying attention.
Well, Craig did make a good point that, and I think he's absolutely right. Assange and WikiLeaks did have quite an impact on broad public opinion, and probably in the sense that, look, we were all around at the time. I was a supporter of going into Afghanistan, and I was a supporter of going into Iraq. I now think, in hindsight, going into Iraq was a big mistake. I think we were misled by bad intelligence. I think an incredible book came out at the time called Saddam Defiant, written by Richard Butler, who was the head of UN weapons inspections. And it's an amazing book, and I never hear about it. But he went through all the weapons inspections that he did in Iraq, and what he pointed out is that at not one point did Saddam Hussein ever grant them a proper inspection of any warehouse, and even at some points he seemed to toy with them by making them wait, 500 meters away from the warehouse, and then make them watch trucks come out with missile-shaped things on them going into the distance, and then they'd be led into an empty warehouse. And he said, we had good reason to think that we should have gone into Iraq, that he was hiding weapons of mass destruction. In hindsight, what probably Saddam did was just trying to create a sense that he was more powerful than what he was, and it completely backfired on him. That might have been ultimately what happened. But I think a lot of people who instinctively knew that or thought there was something wrong about going in, what WikiLeaks did for them, it sort of gave them more of the substance that they needed to say, see? So I do think that he's obviously had a massive impact on popular opinion. I could not deny that.
Yep.
And like I said, in 2016, I almost liked the guy.
Yeah, look, I think it's a really interesting, discussion around this. I definitely think he could have done it much better. But I think, as you may have said in the past, we can't allow the perfect become the enemy of the good. And I think what he's done with regards to the you like that one? yeah. But I do think that I personally don't feel like I've read up on this topic. I think I've heard people in the past say, look, he actually was a lot more. There were people that did release things indiscriminately, but he himself, there were things that he was very selective on that didn't compromise missions and people. But again, I'm not across that as well as I'd like to be. But again, I think the net good is from what Julian Assange has done. I think the idea that, the hundreds of thousands, millions of people that died in those wars and continue to die in the wars today, it's highlighted a huge light on this military industrial complex, which is, it's a money-making machine. It doesn't matter if you win or lose. It's about this, revolving, just like in Australia, which we're going to get to later, about the revolving door between public then private sector. In America, it's the defense industry. That's the biggest one. And that revolving door between these organizations like Raytheon and all of those arms producers. BlackRock. Yeah. It's a business model. The way that they destroy these countries. I mean, the reason there's so many guys like that have my eyebrows here is because the countries we came from just got systematically destroyed from the outside.
I agree with you there, yeah.
And that's why I have these stone animals around me, guys. I don't know if you've noticed before, but these stone animals, I didn't just put them here because it was the theme of the Ark. It's actually because Zimbabwe was another story which is where these things were made, where they were destroyed from the outside. And they did have outside influences that basically let the Zimbabwean people down. But that's a story for another day and another podcast. But we are going to try and I could debate this forever, and I definitely want to inform myself more on this. We're going to try as best as possible to stay on the news and see when he's actually landing. I want to get you guys the shot of when he's actually landing and greeted by his father, John Shipton, who Craig's met before. And that's going to be very soon, within the next probably half an hour. But moving on some of the other stories, we had an interesting situation where the Governor-General coming in on the 1st of July, I do believe, she's coming into a well-earned pay increase of 43%, moving her up to $709,000 a year. Senator Malcolm Roberts made the point that Labor is deceitfully claiming that the income increase is due to the fact that David Hurley, the previous Governor-General, received a military pension on top of his salary. But Malcolm Roberts also made the point, if Sam Mostyn wants to be paid a military pension, she should have joined the military and done the service. Craig, what did you think about this one?
Firstly, I love that earlier meme you put up there, sort of thing of the rats in Parliament House. I think that's an absolute that's absolute beauty. It's a photograph. It really sums up. That's right.
Exactly.
Some people think it's an AI image, but it's actually a true real life. Look, it just shows how out of touch the Albanese government is to do this. How out of touch. Now, remember when Tony Abbott decided that he would knight Prince Philip, how everyone went into meltdown. And I said at the time, that didn't cost anyone a single cent. Yet here we are. They've whacked her salary up, $210,000 increase a year. And remember, the Governor-General would not put their hand in their pocket for anything. They've got they've got Yarralumla. I know many probably Australians haven't been there. It's a magnificent residence. It's got these beautiful manicured lawns, right? So you've got the gardener, the pool boy, the security. They've got chefs and servants all laid on there, paid at the taxpayer expense. You've got Commonwealth cars to drive you anywhere where you go with your own chauffeurs, right? You've got access to the VIP, RAF VIP jets. And what is your job? You're effectively basically going to garden parties and handing out awards. It's not as though it's any great jobs, great high significance or great important decisions they have to make. It's a completely ceremonial role. And what my real concern is about these, we're seeing this time after time of these huge amounts being paid to these government funded, really effectively unproductive jobs. Young people today, we want to encourage young kids in Australia today to get involved in entrepreneurial activity that adds value to the economy. That's how we should be directing it. But if you were a young kid today, you would look at all these massive salaries in the public servants. You think, well, why would I bother going to private business and taking all the risks involved in it? I can get in the government service. I can suck up the greasy pole. I can be as woke as I possibly can, and I'll get rewarded with these huge taxpayer jobs and get that. That's how I become a rich person, rather than through entrepreneurial activity. And that, I think, is one of the greatest concerns that I have. And Albanese knows exactly what he's doing. This encourages wokeness as well.
Well, she can join the military now, Craig, because the military is now asking if you want to join the army, what are your pronouns?
That's right.
Didn't you see that?
I saw that.
Well, she can join. She's woken up. She can tell us all her pronouns.
Speaking about that, have you guys noticed, and I've seen a few people say this on TikTok, have you noticed that a lot of the military ads in the UK are now featuring more white men? That's when you know we're going to war, because they've stopped trying to do their diversity quotas, and they're like, no, hang on, we actually have to recruit now.
But what are we going to do? Go into battle with Gucci handbags swinging? I mean, seriously, in high heels, we can't. We need to have men with testosterone who are actually willing to protect our nation. I'm sorry, I'm being a bit sexist, and I'm sure somebody will have a lot to say about it, but
no, you're totally right.
This is the military.
Right.
It is not a tea party.
No, absolutely. And, I was looking at this a couple of years ago, 2019. I knew two people that were brother and sister. The girl applied to join the military 6 months actually, after the boy applied. The boy was still waiting. After 6 months, he hadn't heard from them. The girl, within a couple of months, it was pretty much immediate. They were like, yep, no worries, you can start Monday initial training. And it's like, what are we doing here? We're complaining of this whole system, top to bottom. What have you done?
This is it. I think hell has a special place for heads of HR departments who, are woke. I mean, this is the thing. It's HR departments that are notoriously woke, that people for some reason, well, I guess, are just absolutely terrified to stand up to, and they just destroy departments, they destroy institutions from within, whether it's a commercial corporation, whether it's a football team, whether it's a university, doesn't matter. They just get in there and they just have this incurable disease that they have to change everything in accordance with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
It's called a godlike complex.
Exactly. They're creating it all in their own image. Although, ironically, a lot of the people who do this are actually middle-class, well-to-do white women, not actual sort of downtrodden minorities. But with the army, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, they want to make the reason they're asking for pronouns, and they're asking for your sexuality as well. The stated purpose by a spokesman for the army for this was, we want to make sure the army is diverse and inclusive so we can attract the best. Now, it seems to me, though, that if your great fear in life is being misgendered, then you're probably not the kind of person that we want fighting for us in a war. Like, if that's the kind of thing that would put you in the fetal position.
Absolutely. I so agree with you. Why in God's name do we need to divulge our sexuality to go to war? What are they going to do on the war field? Sorry, but
they're not going to ask.
No one's going to care when there is a gun pointed at your head, whether you are gay, lesbian, trans, whatever. No. It does not matter. We all become the same on a battlefield. We're all the same.
This is a courage deficit. This is the thing. Why do organisations fall to this? Because of two kinds of people. True believers who are just muddled and confused and, as you say, have a God complex and just have to be in control of everything. It has to look exactly how they think it should. And they're brainwashed by the universities. Let's not let them off the hook. But the other kind of person is the coward that lets this happen. Either the coward who lets this happen or the man without a chest. That is, the man who doesn't believe in anything other than his own comfort and not rocking the boat so he can stay where he is in the organisation. When you get the fanatic and you get the coward or the man without a chest together, it doesn't get more dangerous than that. And that's what destroys institutions.
But remember, these are the people that are getting promoted through the public service in Canberra. And that's where the Governor-General, that's why she got the job, because she was one of these great woke people that promoted all these things. So even if you're sitting in Canberra and you believe this is all nonsense, you want to go along because it's a way for a promotion to get up the greasy pole.
Yep, you're the coward or the man without a chest. Yeah, that's right.
Don't say man, Stephen. Can't say man.
Person. Person without a chest.
Speaking of courage, the UK, once again, this is just a developing story with regards to the UK election. First off, I have to make it very clear. Why are you focusing on the UK, Joel? It's because this is a country-sized case study with regards to how to take back your country. The Conservative Party in the UK have completely failed them, a bit like the Liberal Party, but they're not as bad. In the UK, they're shocking. They ruined an 80-seat majority that they had, and they achieved nothing. They didn't properly deliver on Brexit. And then with regards to the Labor Party, they're coming in and it looks like they're about to win this election. Nigel Farage has been soaring in the polls in the last few weeks, and we've been tracking that on this show. He's a friend of the show, actually. We brought him out in 2022 for a tour. Just this week, the establishment thinks that they've got him. They think that they've got him with this story about Russia, and they're trying to basically say that Nigel Farage is blaming the West for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This is what kicked this off. It was this interview that he did on Panorama, I do believe, and I totally agree with what Nigel said, but I'll let you guys be the judge of that.
I'm doing it for a different reason. You want to be Prime Minister. That's what you want to be. And this is, Europe is at war. Now, when the war happened, the big war, when Vladimir Putin sent his troops across the border in 22, you blamed the West, not him. You said, I'll just read it to you and then you can react, that on a tweet, it was a consequence of EU and NATO expansion. Is that a judgment you stand by?
Right. I'll tell you what you don't know. I stood up in the European Parliament in 2014 and I said, and I quote, there will be a war in Ukraine. Why did I say that? It was obvious to me that the ever eastward expansion of NATO and the European Union was giving this man a reason to his Russian people to say they're coming for us again and to go to war.
But you were echoing him.
Sorry?
You were echoing him. That's what Putin says.
No. Sorry, I've been saying this actually since the 1990s. Ever since the fall of the wall. But hang on a second. We've provoked this war. It's, of course it's his fault. He's used what
But we provoked the invasion of Ukraine.
Yes, and very interestingly, once again, 10 years ago when I predicted this, by the way, I'm the only person in British politics that predicted what would happen. And of course, everyone said I was a pariah for daring to suggest it. George Robertson, former Labour cabinet minister, who went on to become the Secretary General of NATO, has in the last couple of weeks said the war is a direct result of EU expansionism.
But I'm asking you about, because it's your judgment, you want to be Prime Minister. Let me ask you about someone else.
My judgment has been way ahead of everybody else's in understanding this.
A bit more on this, guys. So naturally after that, the whole cascade happens, the whole avalanche. You're going to love this, Craig, because it kind of reminds me of what happened to you in 2021 with the jab. But the whole cascade comes down. The entire establishment comes down after him. The big tech, obviously the media, more so than usual. They start saying, Nigel Farage, this is the headline, blames the West for the Ukraine war, and they start piling on him. Rishi Sunak and Starmer, the head of Labour, both turn on him. Both major parties, you've got these memes going around saying GB News is actually KGB News for Putin. And people are rightly pointing out, isn't it hilarious to watch Labour and Conservatives and the mainstream media pile on Farage? Now, Farage, interestingly, points out, hang on a sec, guys, it was Boris Johnson back in 2016 that actually said the exact thing that I said. But all of a sudden, it's not kosher now. And this is exactly what was said, but it doesn't stop people like Piers Morgan, who should know better after being so wrong during COVID. He said Farage continues to shamefully blame the West for the illegal invasion of Ukraine. The truth of the matter is, if you look at it, this is the eastward expansion of Ukraine, and it's color-coded. In 1949, it started with France and a handful of countries, and slowly, you see this eastward expansion towards Russia and eventually getting to Ukraine. But none of this is really deterring the reform vote. We're seeing a situation where Richard Tice, II in control of the party, he is looking to also get his seat as well as Nigel Farage. But we're seeing this continuously roll on. We're seeing Facebook, they banned an interview from one of the Reform UK candidates, something Craig's familiar with. We're seeing Google cancelled the ad account for the Farage campaign. It was later on reinstated, but why is it these mistakes keep piling up and they only go in one direction? And but this is not stopping Nigel. He was on the channel the next day, the English channel that is, and he was calling out the boats and campaigning quite brilliantly as there was a boat being escorted from France. The border force escorted them to the British Isles, and then hand them over to the British Coast Guard. It's not stopping him though, and this is the last thing I'll play. This is another leader of another Conservative party getting 100% behind Nigel Farage.
And he is our messenger. All Remainers support Nigel, please.
Please do, and you know what? We're now second in the opinion polls. I know Labour are a long way ahead, but with 11 days to go, we've got the big M going with us. Come and help.
Make it so, team.
Phenomenal people, but and one guy, I mean James, he put it as two cheeks of the same backside. But guys, what do you think about this particular story? Because obviously I've opined a lot on this, but what a case study for Australia with regards to how to make change.
There's certainly a lot sorry.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There's a lot to say,
A lot
isn't
to
it?
unpack, so I think a lot of issues there.
Sure.
Especially on the Ukraine-Russian war. Okay? The idea that there's sort of like pure good and pure bad in that conflict, I think, is wrong, whichever side that you want to look at, right? And what disturbs me is there is not enough talk about ceasefire and peace. You've got so many leaders in the Western nations that seem to be pushing for more fighting, continue the war, right? What does victory look like for Ukraine? What it means, they kill all the Russian young men before all the Ukrainian young men die.
They're up to women.
Is that what it's about, right?
They're up to women.
There should be calls for peace. Now, if you look at it from a historical perspective, remember the losses that Russia had during this. And I don't want to be an apologist for Russia, right? But look at the what they went through in the Second World War, the losses that they had, right?
Fighting the Nazis.
Fight, right? Okay. They don't want what they see as a potential enemy on their border. Now, that's no different to what the Americans wanted in Cuba. The Americans don't want missiles pointing at America in Cuba. So you can't have it sort of both ways in this thing. There's got to be a lot more talk about peace, and trying to demonise one side all the time and sort of is not going to achieve that to bring peace about. Secondly, on the issues of Farage, you were right. This is the pile-on that happens in the media. They all go after you over one issue, and everyone just piles on. And to think that you've got these social media platforms, this is foreign election interference. Well, now we had that during the Australian election. No one we couldn't raise two hoots about it. Right? I was unable to have a Facebook account during the election campaign. My Facebook account was banned. YouTube was censoring the speeches in the Australian Federal Parliament. So there was someone sitting in some office there over in the US in a foreign country, watching what was being said in Australian Parliament, and George Christian himself, they go, no, we don't like what they're saying. That contradicts some of our big American corporations that are Pfizer and this like. They're trying to make all this money in Moderna. So we'll actually cancel that and censor that from the Australian people. Right, we need, I believe we need new laws to protect the freedom of speech, to make sure that we can't have these foreign tech platforms that are now effectively the new town square, deciding who will go to their platform during an election campaign.
We've appointed one of them chief e-safety officer.
Yeah, we have.
Julian Assange.
But what's interesting,
straight from Silicon Valley.
There is a difference between when you got censored, Craig, and right now. And the difference is a lot of people know that when you get censored, you're over the target. You must be the person that's actually making some sort of sense. So when Nigel Farage is being censored, he's right over the mark. What happened, I'm sorry, to the Minsk agreement? Why are we not even looking at the Minsk agreement? That was the agreement between Russia that stated they don't want NATO on their doorstep. And if anyone said Ukraine had no intention of joining NATO, that is completely incorrect. Ukraine did have an intention of joining NATO. There are Russians that were being ethnically cleansed in the Ukraine borders. And now Ukrainians have lost that many troops that is not on mainstream media, that you have 17-year-olds and 18-year-old females being drafted into the army. And I'm sorry, what business do women have fighting a war? This is insane. There was a peace deal on the table when Boris Johnson went over there and stopped it completely. We need a peace deal. This has got to cease immediately.
You know, some of us here are old enough to remember the debate around 9/11, and it was par of the course for channels like the ABC to blame the West and blame America for 9/11. In fact, it seems to me that the Ukraine is about the one thing that's ever happened in human history that you're not allowed to blame America for. Everything else you pretty much can, except for Ukraine. Now, when Nigel Farage says that what caused... Note that Nigel says sort of the language he uses is what caused Putin to go in, not what justified him to go in. So he's not...
A big difference.
A big difference, exactly. He's not saying that Putin had every right to do what he did in the way that he did it. He's simply saying the reason it happened, the external reason it happened, is because of the behaviour of America and NATO. That's really sort of classic political science. And what he said, there's nothing original in what Farage said. It had all been said before him by a very famous, a very prestigious American political science, John Mearsheimer. In a lecture, you can find it on YouTube. It's called something like, Russia is going to invade Ukraine and it's all America's fault. It's literally probably got now about 30 million views. It is about a 1-hour lecture by John Mearsheimer, one of the most distinguished political scientists in America. Now, not everyone agrees with him, but the fact is that Nigel Farage's views have serious scholarly support. And I'm shocked that people get so upset, particularly weirdly the left. People in sort of in the mainstream left media get really annoyed when people make the claim that the Ukraine war is somehow a sordid affair and something that, for the most part, was caused by America's actions in that region. And not just inviting other countries close on Russia's borders to join NATO, but actually interfering in Ukrainian elections to make sure that leaders are pro-American. That's another thing that they've been implicated in.
Zelensky.
Zelensky and before that as well. So it just baffles me that... look, here's the bottom line. To bring this issue to the UK election, the British don't give, and here's a nice British expression, they don't give a tinker's cuss about what's going on in Ukraine. As long as they don't have a bunch of Ukrainian refugees coming to England, they don't give a tinker's cuss about what's going on there. So the media, being as out of touch as it is, can make as much of whatever Nigel Farage said as they want. The people don't care. They care about the cost of living. They care about immigration. They couldn't care less about anything he says controversial about Ukraine. That's not going to affect one vote.
Yeah. Just an update, guys. I am watching this live stream right now. Julian Assange, his plane has just touched down. These are live images from Canberra's airport. I'm going to keep an eye on this as he gets out of the plane. But before we get there, you know who does care about it is Kim Jong Un saying we're all united under the European Court of Human Rights, which is something that the UK wants to get out of. That's something Nigel's campaigning for. But Kim Jong Un, he vows to his people to prevent the UK from leading the ECHR, which is meant to govern these human rights cases. And obviously, North Korea is the governing, is the ruling body and all this. They set the standard. Craig, what did you think about that?
It just shows that we've got these international bodies. We should be making decisions that's best in Australia's interests. And so we're ceding so much of our sovereignty away to these international bodies, these international human rights commissions. And we have these human rights inspectors coming out and wandering around Australia, trying to say how bad we are on certain things and yet completely overlooking other things.
Yeah.
It's just another example of why we've got to put, when it comes to all these international treaties and agreements and things, and the WF, World Health Organization, global pandemic treaties, all these Paris agreements and things, we've got to put our nation interest first.
Where were the human rights when the mandates were happening? Where were they? Sorry, but
absolutely.
You've got a 1984. Yeah, that's right. We've got a 1984 style life now, where up is down, down is up, and we're trying to manoeuvre through that.
Yeah, Stephen, did you have anything to say on this topic?
Yeah, well, I mean, on the European Court of Human Rights, there's a great interview with Suella Braverman, Tory MP, and Constantine Kissin on trigonometry, and he asks her, hey, we got out of the EU in 2019. Why on earth why can't we send illegal immigrants out of here? Like, what's the deal? And she said, we left the EU, but we never left the European Court of Human Rights. We're still part of that, and we're still subject to its decisions, and that's why they're still so weak on immigration. And just like Craig said, They got to pull out of all of those international agreements and get their sovereignty back. And Australia needs to do a lot of the same thing. And it's such an insult.
Yeah.
Human rights experts coming to Australia, looking around. Australia is one of the best countries in the world to live. Of course, there are some people who do it really rough. You've got Indigenous Australians in very remote communities. But the reason they're doing it tough in remote communities is not because we don't care about human rights in Australia. It's because they're in remote communities where there are no services. Where no one wants to go and be a teacher, be a healthcare worker, be a doctor. It's largely a geographical issue. And you get these human rights lawyers coming over here, as though we're the Congo.
Yeah. Well,
it's a complete insult.
And they should go to Africa. They should actually see what's out there.
Who gives them the right and the actual authority to decide what are human rights and what they can and cannot enforce? And you're right, they're unelected bureaucrats that we invite into our country. It's incredible that we're in the WHO, all these lovely organisations we need to get out of. I think Nigel's onto a winning promise there.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we go to this, he's about to get out of the plane in probably the next 5 minutes. I'm so stoked that there's 50 of you guys watching live right now. This is a brand new YouTube channel. The idea that there's 50 out of the less than 500 subscribers, obviously people are on other platforms. Thank you so much. This was a trial run because if you didn't know, we have Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, the presidential debate this Friday. We are streaming the CNN live stream on this channel. I do believe Craig might actually be joining us and a number of others. I'm looking forward to sharing that with you guys, but can you please give this stream a share? Get it out there. This is the very first stream of many, many to come in the coming years. Get the word out there because if not just for us, we're about to see Julian Assange step out of the plane right now. I'm expecting to see him greet his father in a second and his family who hasn't seen in many years. And I think they're going to be quite emotional scenes to watch for a lot of Aussies that are seeing. But we're going to keep an eye on that while we talk, but we're going to keep talking about a few other things.
It looks like that's the RAF base at Canberra Airport. So that's it's the other side. So you've got the passenger terminal where where everyone flies into Canberra, but the other side of the airport is the RAF where all the government jets land. That looks like where they are.
Right. Yep. I'm looking at on the other one right now. Look, guys, I can see some biosecurity people in officers in yellow fluoro vests. I'm imagining they're conducting, obviously certain enacting Australian laws. I mean, this is an international flight. Remember,
COVID test.
Hopefully not a PCR.
Not a PCR.
Sorry.
Hopefully not. Who knows? But I'm looking forward to seeing this. Guys, can you fact check me on this? I saw a meme the other day saying that it was Assange on Megyn Kelly's show, and Assange was asked the question, do you have any dirt on Trump, basically? And obviously you've released some on Hillary Clinton, and he said, no, I didn't, because there is none. Is that completely crap, or is that something you guys have heard before?
No idea.
I haven't heard. I know, but Trump. I think that's one of the reasons why he's being released at the moment with that US presidential election coming up, because Trump had made sort of soundings that he'd have a look at it, and I think Trump would have released Assange. So Biden wants to get in, so to get off the table.
Are you sure it's Biden that wanted to do it?
Well, I think that
I don't think Biden knows how to go to the toilet on his own.
True, that's right. This debate will be interesting on Friday, but
won't it just?
We're just keen to see if whoever else is there to try and a lot of politicians will try and make a lot of political advantage out of this, and wouldn't surprise me if Albanese's there or a few of the other Labor mob are there, the government mob are there trying to take some credit or trying to build up their electoral popularity at the moment.
Get a photo.
No, absolutely. I was going to say, before Julian hops out, and again, guys, we're keeping an eye on the camera. We'll bring it up as soon as we see him come out. I just wanted to bring up this story in the meantime to fill time. Wikipedia links right-wing pages to fear, anger, and disgust, whereas left-wing pages to joy. You couldn't make this stuff up.
Why are you so surprised that this is in Wikipedia when the Wikipedia is written by people who just go in there and write whatever crap they want to write? Sorry, it is crap. Yes, the left is all touchy-feely. We've got to get in touch with our emotions. There's nothing to do with thought processes or lateral thinking, or it's all emotion.
It's just astonishing because the Long March has also included, obviously, Reddit. Wikipedia wasn't that bad when I was in school. Like, it was actually all right as a starting point.
Oh my God, Joel, you're almost showing your age.
Yeah, well, at the
No,
time,
I'm joking.
at the time, it was a good starting place. You could find some primary sources and actually go directly to the sources. It was footnoted, but it's like the Long March through the institutions has completely run roughshod through all of that, and now we're in a situation where they've taken over that asset as well. And it's like, well, what do we go to now?
Books.
Books.
Ladies and gentlemen, read books.
Yeah. I remember when Dr. McCullough was out here and he told the story about there was something on his page that was completely and utterly false, he said. So he got one of his friends who was a scholar to to go and edit it and correct it and put the references in. Sort of thing. He said they did it on a public holiday, right? He said they did it like it was at midnight at night just to see how long. They said that within an hour it had been changed back.
That's right.
So you've got all these bots looking at any change. So they want to make sure that their ideal of history and records are the same, and they write it from a true leftist perspective.
So what hope do kids have when they're doing an assignment in primary school or high school and they look up some sort of a topic, right? The first thing that comes up always is Wikipedia.
Yeah, history is being written by the victors, I guess. That's the idea of it, Stephen.
I mean, I hear you and I agree with you. Although, here's the thing. When I went through uni in the late 90s and when you guys went through uni, did your studies, I think I can speak for all of us, all the resources we had were basically given to us by the teacher or in the university library. There were really... If you wanted to get alternative points of view, you really had to go digging around, and who had the time and money to do that? Today, it's a totally different kettle of fish. If you've got some crazy feminist teacher or some crazy critical theory teacher telling you stuff that you just know is not right, you don't have to just rely on the university library. You can go to the internet and look up an interview with Jordan Peterson or look up an interview with a top scholar and get an alternative point of view, find out about other sources and actually get to really understand the topic from a diversity of opinion. So although, a lot of the internet has been corrupted, in a way, it has freed up information and freed up the ability for people to get alternative points of view in a way that I did not have back even in the late 90s. So I think in many ways it's a real game changer. And the classic example, I think it's very easy for us to forget what public debate was like before Jordan Peterson. I see Jordan Peterson as a sort of an epochal change in public debate. It was Jordan Peterson who was the first one that I ever heard offer a very articulate and convincing argument against this idea of the gender wage gap. I had always heard it. I remember them talking about it at university. I'm a career academic. I remember Macquarie University academics talking about the gender wage gap, and I just assumed, oh, okay, there's some gender wage gap. I never thought that much about it. And pretty much most people never thought much about it until Jordan Peterson came along and said, no, it's nonsense, and this is why. And he just changed everything. And you just didn't have that back in the 90s or even to a large extent in the 2000s. And so in some ways, it's a great time actually to be a university student because you've just got access to so many other opinions.
Most of them don't know who Jordan Peterson is. This is the problem with university students because unfortunately a lot of them, like I'll go back to my daughter who's doing an elective at the moment, are too busy being told that they have to do Welcome to Country every single morning.
Or apologizing for their whiteness.
Yeah.
Did you see that story? Shocking.
It's absolutely ludicrous. And it's funny because my daughter doesn't do this kind of stuff. And I can't even tell you the first day that she did this elective, the message I got, but there was a lot of F-bombs being thrown in capital letters down the whole message. Wasn't impressed.
Not at all. Can I just say a huge shout out to the ABC? Obviously, the taxpayer funds them $1 billion a year, isn't that right, Craig? There's a billion for them, and then plus. Over $1 billion, and then another $1 billion for SBS, which is another. Shout out to the ABC for obviously live streaming this. We're clearly using the stream, but it's fair use in my opinion. It's off their YouTube. But it looks like Anthony Albanese will be addressing people after this. We'll make sure we keep an eye on that so everyone can see.
It seems unusual that he hasn't got off the plane this yet. That seems it's been quite a few minutes.
You reckon?
Yeah, look,
I thought, I mean, like it's an international flight. I figured, maybe that.
How many people are on there?
what's today?
It's not like it's a jumbo jet and everyone's waiting to get their luggage.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I saw biosecurity people going in. Maybe they're trying to say, like, breathe, Epstein, breathe. Like.
Oh, God.
Couldn't help myself.
Clinton-proof vest may not have succeeded.
He didn't get the message, I don't think. Anyway, guys, thanks you guys for sharing this. The stream's growing as a result of your shares. Continue to share it out there, get it out there. We're going to keep an eye on this. I don't want to miss it, and I know you guys don't want either. I'm going to keep going with some of these stories, and while we keep an eye on this particular screen. Stephen, I wanted to get you to weigh on this. Europe's fertility crisis. We're seeing a massive decrease with regards to the birth rates per woman in Europe. Is this basically like the fall of Rome sort of stuff we're looking at here?
Absolutely. I mean, someone once, about 4 weeks ago, someone asked me, what is the biggest crisis facing the West? And straight away, the fertility crisis. We are just not having enough children. And the thing is, it's all well and good to whinge about excessive levels of immigration. But if you are not reproducing yourselves, then the economy is going to shrink and shrink and shrink, and it's going to cease to be functional. And so, it's partly our own fault that we're having to rely so much on immigration. I think there are other reasons for the immigration, but absolutely, this is a trend that really starts to kick into sort of hyperdrive from the 1960s onwards, particularly with the introduction of the pill in around about 1960. And the trend has just gotten worse and worse, and it's hard to think of there would be one or two, but it's hard to think of a single prosperous Western country that is at population replacement rate in terms of fertility. And there are people who've been trying to figure out what the causes are. There are probably multiple causes, but the pretty obvious sort of efficient cause is the introduction of the pill in 1960, and then just the social changes brought about by sort of women going into the workforce, delaying children. The longer you delay children tends to be the fewer children you have. Women are now being educated much more than they were in the past. And I remember reading one book by a guy named David Goldberg, and he said all the data points to the fact that the more women become educated, the fewer kids they have. And that's not me arguing that we should stop educating women. So please don't misconstrue me in that way.
Well, you'd have a friend in the Taliban.
Oh, well, my old mate, the Taliban, yeah. No, I do think it's actually the single biggest crisis facing the West, and no one really has a solution. And it's also driven just by the cost of living as well, but really no one has a solution. Obviously, Viktor Orban in Hungary, their plan is if you have 4 kids, I think it is, you don't pay income tax. You don't pay any. Look, I think that's a great idea. Whether it works or not, I can see some
people coming
activity
off
here.
Yeah, coming off the plane. Yeah, guys, we're keeping a close eye on this. Everyone's obviously eager to.
Well, Assange was doing his bit in lockdown. He had 2 kids.
He did.
So,
he did.
He's doing his.
We do have a fertility issue as well from a physical perspective. There is an infertility growth, whether it's from the chemical use or whatever it is that's going on with our bodies. Yes, we are having kids later, and I think IVF is the biggest growing industry, particularly in the Western world. But we definitely have to look at what we are using. Oh, we have got.
Here we go.
Wow.
Oh, there he is. Ladies and gentlemen, Julian Assange has touched base.
Let's see who he's going to go talk to. I don't know who that.
Who is
I don't know who that guy is. They look like some.
Yeah, we at some
airline pilot or something.
If they start doing a press conference sort of thing, we might have to unmute this so we can actually hear what's obviously being said. Is that his wife or
No.
I was going to say I can't actually remember his wife, but supposedly they met in the embassy. It's how they found love. Guys, if you're sharing this right now, please do. This is the moment we're waiting for. I do believe Anthony Albanese will be doing a press conference, probably with Julian. But, we'll see. We'll see. You know what politicians are like. They love to make hay while the sun shines.
Do I see a few tears at the bottom right there, that journalist commentator?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we are dealing ABC.
ABC.
We've got to be in touch with our feelings.
Yeah.
Thank you, the ABC.
I think I'm. There's.
Yeah, looks like I reckon there's more processing that's going to be done. But
I think I actually might be wrong. That might be the main terminal there at Canberra Airport.
Right.
Wrong before. Yeah.
Actually, no. I think I just saw the defence lawyer behind.
Is that his wife?
Oh, that's cute.
I think it might be one of the
No.
kids.
It's very cute. It's back.
No, I think it's probably his
I'd
wife.
say that'd be his wife.
Would be his wife, yeah.
Oh, it's his dad.
Oh.
Oh, I'm gonna cry.
That is
That's
beautiful.
gorgeous. That man has waited a long time. Craig, as Craig alluded earlier, there was Craig met John Shipton the other day.
I met him
a year ago.
about a year or so ago.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Very decent man that had great love for his son, and you know, I said, irrespective of what you think of Assange, you've got to give some credit to his dad. His dad kept on fighting and kept on, raising things. And remember, his dad did like displays of how he was kept in captivity in New York, and his dad never stopped fighting for him. So.
Well, his dad and the brother were responsible for trying to get this film off the ground, The Trust Fall. They helped tremendously.
Yeah. We'll just keep watching this for a little second. We are still trying to work out exactly what is the go. I'd presume there's still going to be a little bit of processing and before they allow them to go before the cameras and do some kind of a press conference. But I remembered the fact that we actually interviewed Julian's brother back in 2021 as a Turning Point Australia interview. There's a lot of people out there that have been working really hard to support the Assanges. They've been doing dedicated rallies. People that aren't Aussies. They're not Aussies. They have no reason other than the fact that they're dedicated to truth and the pursuit of truth and getting, holding the government to a little bit more of an account than they have been. It's quite astonishing images, guys, we're seeing here. It's good to see that his kids aren't there. I don't think, me personally, if I was to have kids one day, I definitely would, and I was a public person like that, I definitely want to protect them. Craig, you know what that kind of...
obviously, you want to have a bit of private time as well, sort of thing in that...
Well, they shouldn't be in the mainstream media at all.
It'll be interesting to see how vocal and active he'll be now if he stays in Australia. I assume he will, and what the impact he's going to have now on Australian culture sort of going forward.
And Australian politics as well.
Yeah. This could be something of a game changer. This is definitely an epochal moment in Australian history.
Yeah, if he started, just put this out there for a second. I'm not saying he should, but if he were to say, I'm going to run and I'm going to start a party from scratch, and he had the right people putting that together and whatever, like that would be, like, we're talking assassination stuff, so surely, like, the intelligence agencies wouldn't want to see that at all.
No,
And
but that'd be fascinating.
It's not that easy to start a new party and to strip voters away from their Labor and Liberal roots, sort of thing. It's not that. It's not that. But it'll be interesting to see. Like, he'll obviously want to have some commentary on politics. It'll be interesting to see, what he's got to say and what avenues he takes.
Yes,
he'd be much more powerful just as a spokesperson rather than constrained by just the necessities of political reality, having to conform to constituencies and
Kind of like Joel.
exactly.
Don't say that. They'll reprioritize their priorities.
Oh, just getting back, you can, to the fertility issue.
Yeah, please.
Well,
Yeah,
firstly, it is a huge issue. But one thing, our migration rate at the moment is well in excess. We're still increasing, have a natural increase in population, but we're having a huge increase in the real big increase in population in Australia is about 2.5%, which takes us to levels that we didn't have till back after the Second World War. It's because of the rate of migration. Now, that migration pushes up housing prices, which is one of the reasons, I think, why so many couples are putting off having kids, because they simply can't afford it and to live in a house in the city. I think that's one reason.
Yes.
So, and the numbers that I saw, I had some numbers up there early. I saw some numbers, I think we're down to like 1.58 or 1.57. And a lot of this decrease, yes, it's been trending down, but since the rollout of the COVID injections, there's been a massive decrease around the world of fertility rates in every single highly vaccinated country. And that has to be some concern.
Right, isn't that interesting?
The numbers
Absolutely. There's been studies. There's studies that have come out that have actually stated that, and that's really disturbing because that's just perpetuating what we've already had.
Now, this is what we're very concerned about. The effect of that COVID vaccine on pregnant women. We've seen the recent case in the US. We've got now 5 US state attorney generals suing Pfizer because they're saying they misled pregnant women about the risks.
Forcing women to take those vaccines, in my opinion, was the singular most despicable thing that took place during the whole 3 years.
You know, the history.
I could not believe that.
The history that we had with thalidomide and and when the long-term safety data was not known, and it is still not.
It's beyond
known.
belief because at the end of the day, in the Pfizer trial, and I'm going to state this, in the Pfizer trial, it's stated for men that if anyone was going to get this particular vaccination, they are not to impregnate anybody for 6 months. Right. And that's from the Pfizer trial.
Actually, in that Pfizer trial, they did a test on rats called the Wistar rats, right? And they had the vaccinated group and they had the unvaccinated group of rats. The miscarriages in the vaccinated group were double the number. And what they said, oh, that really doesn't matter because it's within the historical range that we would expect.
Yeah.
Why have the placebo group? Why have why have a control group if that they just brushed it off, didn't investigate it anymore? It was an absolute outrage and a disgrace. But just also getting back to fertility, what can we do about it? We have to tackle this problem. Right? I think we have to look at it through our taxation system, doing what Hungary did. I think that we've got to look at income splitting.
Yes.
You know, a family, you know, where you've got to encourage the family to stay together, give them some. Here's the
sorry, guys. Anthony Albanese giving a statement. If you don't mind, just
he'll be
bottom left.
For Mr. Assange's case to be concluded.
It's okay.
I am very pleased that this saga is over. And earlier tonight, I was pleased to speak with Mr. Assange to welcome him home and had the opportunity to ask about his health and to have my first discussion with him. His safe return to Australia, we know, means so much to his family. His wife, Stella, his children, who he is looking forward to playing with, like any dad, and his parents, Christine and John. There are a range of views about the actions of Mr. Assange. The Australian government feels strongly that the proper protection of all national security information is vital for safety. Both as Labor leader and as Prime Minister, there was nothing to be gained by the further incarceration of Mr. Assange. And we wanted him brought home. Tonight, that has happened. We have got this done. I also acknowledge the efforts of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, my ministerial colleagues, Penny Wong, the Attorney General, and others. Other Australian officials who've worked tirelessly on this case, particularly over the last couple of years. In particular, I want to thank Ambassador Rudd and High Commissioner Stephen Smith, who travelled home to Australia with Mr. Assange. We'll have meetings about AUKUS and other arrangements over coming days as well. They worked with his legal team to facilitate a very smooth journey. This is the culmination of careful, patient and determined advocacy, work that I am very proud of.
How many years was he patient?
Another example of why mature, calibrated and consistent engagement with our partners is the best way to get results in Australia's national interest. Happy to take a couple of questions.
Kean, there are many views about Julian Assange, as you said. Some do not regard him as a hero. Do you think he was a journalist who was wrongfully pursued over what he did?
Oh, look, I think that there will continue to be different views about
what a fob of a question.
That's a great question.
He fobbed that off.
As Prime
Yeah, he did.
You mean a fob of an answer?
Yeah, fob of an answer.
To firmly say that whatever the views that people have, there was no purpose to be served by this ongoing incarceration.
They were quiet for. They were very quiet for many years.
I spoke with Mr. Assange tonight. He described it as a surreal and happy moment. He's landing.
No thanks to Albanese.
I think some hats off have got to go to Andrew Wilkie from the MP from down Tasmania. Andrew was very supportive of Assange, and also George Christensen. Don't forget George Christensen. Those two, George went against what was at the time the party line. He joined with Andrew Wilkie and worked hand in hand together. And Those two were talking about it when the rest of the Parliament was silent. So I think it's a great win for both, George and Andrew tonight as well.
Governments have been negligent to allow it to drag on so long instead of advocating as strongly as you've done.
Good question.
What's important? I'm responsible for my job.
And
My
you're doing a
job is to
great job,
advocate,
Albanese.
For Australian citizens. Chang Leia's home. Sean Turnell's home. One of the things that my government does is at times as well, we don't shout. We're not in a contest of machismo.
It's not time for Albanese to take a victory lap over this.
No, he doesn't shout. He's got the personality of an amoeba, flatlining.
I'm so used to us being pre-recorded, I'm really trying not to swear because this...
Oh, please. Can we beep? Do we have a beep? No beeps. Oh, God.
No latency.
Expect to meet Mr. Assange in the next day or so? And secondly, could you give us a sense...
Sorry, you didn't conclude...
Will you be meeting him in the next day or so? And also, what point did you actually realise that this was going to happen? You've been working on it for a couple of years. Was it a conversation with Joe Biden? Was a message sent from State Department of Foreign Affairs? How did that play out?
Well, it played out over a long period of time.
Oh, God.
It's a secret, you don't reveal these sorts of things publicly.
It's astonishing how he says nothing.
But
he's
a true politician. He says nothing.
Saying words, though.
Only someone would just leak it all.
The US ambassador here that they are also pleased that this has been resolved. The first time I raised it was with President Biden at the NATO summit in Madrid. I raised it also with other senior members of the US administration. But this was always the case, to be very clear, that because of the separation between the political representatives and the judiciary, this was always going to be something that required discussion, patient with the Department of Justice. And certainly over that period of time, there has been an issue as well. I've exchanged very directly with Mr. Assange's lawyers, as have our diplomatic representatives. And Mr. Assange's lawyers...
There's so much to say here. If you guys are wondering why he's not saying anything, as usual...
Because he's done nothing.
He's done nothing.
He's got the personality of a mortician.
He does. God, I so agree.
He's trying to make political capital in a way, but he has to be really careful because the intelligence agencies in America do have a very good stronghold here with regards to how they control our foreign policy.
So we had to be really patient, Joel. We had to be so patient that he was there for 12 years. That's how patient. So if anything goes wrong with any of us overseas, we have zero help.
We're stuffed. I don't trust this guy. And by the way, I don't trust ScoMo either.
Wow.
A resolution being achieved.
Saying nothing.
And the objective here was to conclude these matters.
I hope Julian isn't being subjected to this.
They've been concluded in a way that
I would have whisked him off by now.
Yeah, honestly, Craig's natural inclination here to give credit to the MPs that have fought hard on this is exactly what the Prime Minister should be saying.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be doing a victory lap. I mean, he has no right.
He's done nothing.
Dude's been in for 40 freaking years. This dude...
That's right. There was no... look, Andrew Wilkie is, I disagree with a lot what Andrew says, and he's probably not really on the same side of politics as I am. And but I'll give Andrew Wilkie full credit because he was the one that was pushing it in the Parliament. George Christensen, surprisingly at the time when Assange wasn't all that popular at the time, joined with them. They are the ones that actually pushed in the Parliament to get the support. Albanese and his mob sat there and did nothing. And that's you're right. They're the people that should be getting some credit.
But that's why you belong in Parliament, Craig, because you can actually disagree with a politician and still say that he did a good job. And this is what we don't have enough of in our country, is the disagreement and the debate. We just don't have the debate. And there's nothing wrong with having differences of opinion, whether we have differences of opinion with Assange or any sort of political stance. But we have to give credit where credit is due. And I'm sorry, Albanese.
Oh, I know. George Christensen actually went over at his own expense to the UK to visit him in prison. That's what George did, sort of thing. And plus talking about it with many other MPs saying, come on, look, we've got to give him support. Right? And they're the people that led from the front, that helped change the public opinion. And it was the public opinion that turned this around, not anything great sort of trick that Albanese has done. I think it's...
What did he do? I'm really confused. Does anyone actually know what Albanese did?
I think it's a bit offensive that he was, as said, doing a bit of a victory lap around. He's just said, look, he's glad he's home. He should thank everyone that was involved and get off the stage.
Yep.
Yep.
Literally. It's tough, guys. This is live. Can I just go back and see what he's actually saying? Because I'm just curious what kind of questions he's being posed right now. And obviously, we're all curious to hear what Julian's going to get up to, where he's going to be staying. And obviously,
I was going to ask whether there was a breakthrough moment or a particular turning point in these negotiations, a moment when he realised that it would be possible.
I think there were probably a range, a number of
Sorry.
steps along the way.
Sorry. You said what we were all thinking, so, you know.
Seriously, guys, like, come on, man.
This required a range of decisions to be made by the Department of Justice in the United States, which of course is
Rami, can you mute it for a second?
It's almost like someone who's wandered into the wrong job interview and they're asking him questions about things that he knows nothing about.
Do you know what? As a dentist, all I want to do is do something with those teeth and change his S sound so he can actually speak properly, because nothing that's coming out of his mouth is actually making any sense right now.
You know what it's like? It's like you've rocked up to a store and you're like, okay, you guys sell cheeses, right? What cheeses have you got? This idiot's behind the counter. And he's like, oh, we have many cheeses. You know, we got, you may or may not like them. And it's like, okay, but which cheeses do you have? Do you have blue? I'm looking for blue cheese. Do you have this and that? We have. Well, there have been many cheeses that have been made over the years. It's like, bro, I'm gonna go to the store next door. But this is our Prime Minister. He
should also be giving credit to the public that got behind and supported Assange. He should be giving credit to his father, who lobbied so hard over so many years. The thing is, he's released because of public perception and turning the public opinion around.
You're asking him to be humane.
That's why he has been released. And Albanese should be there giving credit to the Australian public that supported him, people that went to protest, people that rallied, people that put out the signs free Assange. That's who he should be there giving credit for, rather than to try to sort of take the credit himself.
And the other thing is, if you look at who the public movement that was pushing for Assange to be released over the last 4 years, it was the freedom movement. It was the anti-lockdown, anti-mandate movement. And so the ironic thing is that those who would have absolutely no sympathy for that freedom movement and are cheering on Assange being brought home, in actual fact, the movement that most put this on in public attention, and we all went to the rallies and you saw the signs up, free Julian, free Assange, it was everywhere. It was the freedom movement.
Yep.
That's just another thing that will not get the recognition or the thanks that it deserves. But it was the freedom movement.
What I'll be very interested in seeing going forward now, we've got, remember, the Labor are pushing the mis and disinformation bill, right?
Yeah.
They are pushing the more power for the safety commissioner.
Yeah.
Now you've got this big public sentiment for Julian Assange on the free speech issues.
Incredible.
This will be very interesting going forward.
So it's like
everything that Albanese has been pushing from, in policy-wise, is opposite for what Julian Assange has been standing for.
But did you see how pale he is? He probably knows it.
So no wonder he's like he's hugging the cactus. It's like, it's all short-lived.
But that is a brilliant point, because central to modern wokeism, and a lot of woke-divists will be...
I love that word.
Yeah, a lot of woke-divists are jumping up and down saying, great, Assange is back, he hates America, I hate America. Yeah. But they're the same ones who are big on censoring information.
That's right.
The cognitive dissonance is incredible.
That's why I think where this debate goes is going to be very interesting in the coming months and years.
Absolutely.
This will be a very interesting year. I mean, it always promised to be an interesting year. It's certainly not disappointing.
And you know what? I love reminding Americans about this, because we obviously lost a lot of our reputation with regards to the lockdowns and everything. And they're like, what happened? What happened to the Crocodile Dundees and the Sandy from Grease Lightning and all that? I thought you guys were tough as nails. And I was like, okay, let me tell you about some Aussies you have heard of. Julian Assange, October Surprise 2016. What about Miranda Devine, the one that dropped the story of the Hunter Biden laptop story to the New York Post?
Yeah.
Like that's what we can produce as well. You know, it was 800 Aussies on light horsemen that captured and opened the way up to Jerusalem, and 60,000 British troops couldn't do that. That's the sort of ilk we come from, and that's why I get so annoyed when I see this idiot on TV, and that's what the world sees, and he's my prime minister. And I can't, you know.
But America's got nothing better. Like, I mean, okay.
They're probably looking at him saying, wow, what a guy.
I know, he's not wearing a diaper. I mean, we've gone up in the food chain. There's no diaper involved and we haven't backdoored it. So, you know, it's an improvement.
At least Albo doesn't walk along and then just turn and face the camera and smile.
Oh, yeah.
Like
God.
I won't say that. Can we, let's tune in. All right, he's walked out the door. Mate, it'd be funny if at that moment he turned and faced the camera and smiled. All right, we're going to keep an eye out on this live stream. I don't think anything else is coming up, but who knows? Assange may do his own actual press conference. We have no idea, but we're going to keep it up. We have some more stories to go through. There's actually some of the more interesting stories we haven't gotten to. Speaking of reunions, we saw, in terms of a warm embrace, we saw a situation last week where Matt Kean announced his resignation from the Parliament, and as a member of Parliament, he's hugging members of his family there. Good friend Malcolm Turnbull. These are obviously photos that were put on social media, and you've got Rita Panahi in the background. And he very quickly took up a new job with Prime Minister Albanese and Craig Kelly's best friend, Chris Bowen. And Craig's shaking his head. He was appointed the chair to the Climate Change Authority. And this rings true to exactly what he said he was going to do in serving the climate change agenda. So, Craig,
don't you just love that name, the Climate Change Authority? You know, they're they're just not an ordinary government department. They're an authority. I love the way they put that title in there. Look, Kean was a zealot from the start. He prescribed electricity prices in the state skyrocketed under his leadership when he was in charge of climate and energy. Right, he was part of the Liberal Party that sold off those coal-fired power stations, that made the people that bought them billionaires, because they undervalued them so much as the state government. His policies were an absolute disaster. He's a zealot. He still can't explain anything about how we're going to try and run a grid on wind power, solar panels and big batteries. And to think he's now given this job with Labor, he's where he belongs, down with the Labor Party, and the Greens in Canberra.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you think the Liberals are going to kick him out of the Liberal Party? Because,
of course not.
I mean, you've now got a Liberal Party
be the right thing to do.
member that's working with the Labor Party as a bureaucrat. I mean, okay, we discussed this last week that we said I thought he'd go to Simon Holmes' court and start working with him.
He can do both.
Yeah.
He might even be able to do it. If there's no conflict, they might be able to do both.
I thought he could join the Teals because I think he'd be perfect as a Teal.
Just put this on from a Liberal Party perspective. The Liberal Party's federal policy is for nuclear power. Now, we can argue that, but that's the federal platform. So therefore, any member of the Liberal Party that publicly speaks against that, right, should be kicked out of the party. Now, he was there with Albanese and Bowen publicly criticising the policies of the federal Liberal Party. Under any other circumstances, that should get you expelled from the party.
Precisely. Yeah. And it was only 3 days after he resigned from New South Wales Parliament that he announced that he was taking up this new position, which must mean that while he was a Liberal MP, he was negotiating with Labor for this job.
That's right.
He's a traitor to his own party. This is a man without a chest.
You're missing one simple thing. There's got to be diversity, equity, inclusion, even in the energy sector. So the Liberal Party will just, keep him on.
I mean, because kicking him out would actually be a move of principle and strength, and that is just not what.
When was the Liberal Party? When was the last time you saw that in the Liberal Party?
It's been a very long time.
Yes.
I'm a historian, in fact. Yeah.
Hang on, it was when they fought for their pay increase, isn't that?
For their pay, that's right. They fought hard for that. That was the hard fight, based on principle, of course. But yeah, I mean, this guy is your classic grasper. He's your classic scraper. He's your classic man without a chest. He's in it for himself. I mean, he was pro-nuclear. He was at one point pro-nuclear, and then he switched. And look, I think essentially what goes on is there are different kinds of people who go into politics and the Liberal Party. You get your dyed-in-the-wool true conservatives who go into it, and the moderates or left of centre see them as having a lot of potential and therefore see them as dangerous. And they basically make all sorts of promises, give them sweet jobs as staffers, and they bring them over into the moderate section. And so they were true believers, and then they make compromises. And then you've got others who just want to be career politicians. Matt Kean had a real job for about 3 seconds in his life working for PricewaterhouseCoopers. He is a career Liberal. And he was only ever in it for himself. He discovered that there's a ton of money in the renewables industry.
Yep.
The renewables industry throws money at people. It throws money at parties who will support renewables. He got on. I'm not saying that he's done anything corrupt or illegal. I'm not saying that at all. But there is a lot of career advancement. There are a lot of future careers in that area. And he is just a classic example of a career politician who follows where the influence, where the money is.
Under this net zero nonsense, there is hundreds of billions of dollars,
yes,
if not over $1 trillion, that's going to be spent.
Yep.
Now, he says that's a gravy train, that's a government-driven gravy train that he wants part of.
Absolutely.
I have a suggestion for him. Why doesn't he join Greenpeace, and perhaps he'll go back to nuclear just like the founder of Greenpeace? He might just start seeing sense after that.
The founder was kicked out and Wikipedia changed it so he's no longer the founder.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Kind of like Robert Malone with the founder of the, mRNA.
Remember that?
Got kicked out of Wikipedia.
If you want to get promoted in Canberra today, you have to be anti-nuclear. Anyone that mentions anything that is pro-nuclear, in any of the government departments, if you thought that, you'd have to sit there and shut up because that would cost you your job, and you'd have a black tick next to your name, never to be promoted. That's the reality of life, how it works in Canberra.
Well, let's see what happens with Dutton's policy.
Well, I think it's a gutsy policy from Dutton. I hope he follows through with it. I'm sure he will. I think it's a great thing. But I think there's an important discussion to be had, if not today, another time, about renewables interests over politicians and political parties, the amount of money that they can pump into getting a party elected or getting a party defeated based on their policy on renewables. There's a discussion to be had about that. Nick Cater is fantastic on this issue, and he says that probably the renewables lobby groups are probably the most powerful lobby groups in Australia right now. I mean, we all wondered for so long, why is it that the Liberal Party just can't seem to get off the whole net zero thing, just promote coal. Everyone knows coal is the common sense solution to a lot of this. Why can't they do it? Why do they have to stick with wildly unpopular policies that raise energy prices? The answer is they're scared witless of renewables lobby groups who have billions and billions of dollars funded by wealthy Silicon Valley billionaires who have shares in renewables and actually own renewables assets, basically funding campaigns to get parties elected or removed. That's what they're afraid of.
It's insane. And we've got plenty more on this. If you guys are wondering why Craig's breathing so heavily into the mic, it's because we're looking at Chris Bowen right now. And Chris is actually, Craig posted this video and I thought it was hilarious. It had to do with, this is a map of the offshore wind capacity factors around the country. The darker the green, the more it shows a different level of capacity. The more it goes red, the higher the capacity for offshore wind farms, rather.
And industries like BlueScope need renewable energy and lots of it, and need constant renewable energy. Offshore wind is exactly that, constant renewable energy. Offshore wind is exactly that, constant renewable energy.
Static energy.
Offshore wind is exactly that.
Oh, God.
It is just unbelievable that he would make a comment like that is completely, utterly contradictory to the facts. Right? Now, this is not some, a backbencher that doesn't understand the policy or some, activist on Q&A. This is the federal industry minister for this portfolio that is involved in directing hundreds of billions of dollars worth of expenditure. And he thinks that offshore wind is consistent power. Now, you saw those little maps up there before, right? And there's actually government documents on this that they've done the work. It's a 2001 government document. And they've estimated the wind farm off the coast of Wollongong, 25 kilometres out to sea, would have a capacity factor of 34.5%. Now, that's if it's working 100% of the time, say it's a 100 megawatt wind farm, that means instead of having 100 megawatts per hour over a year, it averages only 34.5%. That's the government's own data. Right? Now, the onshore wind turbines in New South Wales have a 35% capacity. So it is no better whatsoever. If you take it 100, you see there, the only place where you get very high capacity is a couple of 100 kilometres off the south coast of Tasmania, the deep red there. But all around the coast of New South Wales, you can see the capacity factors there are between about 25% and I think that's number 35%. Right? Now, that is only marginally better or not than what we have for onshore wind turbines. So Bowen is saying something that is completely and utterly false, and yet he wants to spend hundreds of billions of dollars in this field. It just shows, I know Bowen. Right? He's not lying. He's just not up to the job. He's not competent. And the danger of someone like Bowen is the only thing that surpasses his ignorance is his arrogance. Because he thinks that he's 100% right and pushes it forward with this project, which has so many flaws and will be an environmental disaster for Australia. And he thinks it's going to give constant power. It is tragic for the nation.
And I tell you what, the people up the coast, whether it's the Illawarra or other areas, they are not having it. I've seen tons of these meetings, stacked full of people, and they are not having it. They're not happy. This is a ticking time bomb, and Peter Dutton, he's not as good as I hope he can be. I hope he gets more into the One Nation area of policy and all of that. But he's talking basically war games now with regards to. He's talking fight talk with regards to the election. He's calling
as he should.
He's calling Albo a little boy this week. Well, I thought, this guy's
go Dutton. I mean, he's grown some. Thank God. Yeah. But seriously, when you look at it, I just don't understand. These politicians have ideas and they think they're so correct. What my question is, how are we going to hold them accountable if their ideas turn to, I'm sorry to swear, shit? And there's got to be some form of accountability because it's not like they're doing it to a small area. They're doing it to the whole of Australia.
Yeah. Well, these offshore wind turbines off New South Wales will be an absolute environmental disaster. One thing to remember, they are the water off New South Wales, off the New South Wales coast here. It quickly goes down, especially the Illawarra Escarpment, it quickly goes down to a couple of kilometres deep.
Yeah.
Right. So where they're proposing this wind farm off the Illawarra, it goes down to about 300 and 500 metres, and then before you know it, it's down to 2 kilometres deep. So therefore, the only way these wind turbines can work is if they're floating wind turbines.
Yeah.
So what that means, you've got to have basically a platform that the thing floats on, and you have these mooring cables going down to the seabed. And that creates, imagine you've got 300 wind turbines in this small area in the middle of a whale migration path with all these mooring cables going down to the bottom. And then you've got marine debris and you've got ropes and you've got fishing line all getting tangled around those cables that becomes a snare for whales.
Shocking.
It is, and there's nowhere in the world have they, offshore wind, firstly, floating offshore wind is a experimental technology, and nowhere in the world have they rolled these out in this number in the middle of a whale migration zone.
So where are the environmentalists in all this? You need to actually ask yourself, we're cutting down koala habitats.
Sure.
We're encroaching on the whale habitats. You've got
killing the
eagles.
cows.
Yeah, we're killing the cows.
Killing the bees, killing the chickens.
Yeah.
We're dropping poison.
That meme was great. The chicken meme. I love that meme. I don't know if anyone saw that meme. Where the chickens have got a mask on and it says, why don't we just put the chickens for 2 weeks inside the coop and to flatten the curve.
But 500,000 dead chickens.
But chickens have always had flus and they've always had it. We don't go killing people. Are we going to kill humans next if they've got some sort of a flu? Why don't we just isolate them or something? Why kill?
They just want to vaccinate.
Get over it.
They just want to vaccinate
everything.
Oh,
look, everything that moves.
Vaccinate the internet.
I mean, with the environmentalists, a guy like Michael Schellenberger, who's brilliant on all of this, his answer is basically the brave and intelligent ones are all outwardly they're pro-nuclear. Those who are very intelligent, they know the data, they get it all. They're pro-nuclear, but they're not going to say anything. And then the rest have just bought in to the climate boiling hysteria. And again, it sort of goes back to where we started this whole episode, that once you get a powerful idea in the universities and in the sort of the expert class, in the technocracy, it is almost impossible to speak against it because you don't get funding anymore. You lose your reputation. You lose your ability to network. You basically become ostracized. You basically face a kind of social research professional death. That is where we're at right now, and that is why that's why this is a gutsy move from Dutton, but that's why it's so difficult, even for intelligent environmentalists, to just come out and say, this is all baloney. This is all bad sci-fi. And the obvious alternatives, hey, I don't like coal, but the obvious alternative is staring us right in the face, nuclear energy. Even the Labour Party in England, even the future coming Labour Party, in their recent manifesto they released a couple of weeks ago, they're very clear they're going to transition to nuclear. They're going to start introducing nuclear. Even they're doing it.
Well, the Greens, I think in Germany or France, are
saying
fully
the same
on board
thing.
with it.
They are.
Guys, we've got a few more stories, but I'm going to try and race through them. Craig's made the point that this... How tall are these wind turbines again, Craig?
Look,
size of the Harbour Bridge or something?
Yeah, they're 100 metres high. I think the fact they're floating puts limitations on them. But I'm very keen to see, anyone that lives down in that area knows how big those are. When the southerly buster comes up from down the south of Sydney, sort of think how big the seas get out there. I'd actually like to see some of these things built just for fun, to see how they go in, 15 and 17 metre swell sort of thing.
It's shocking.
And see how they're going to stand up. It is a disastrous idea, no matter however you look at it. There's also the issue, you said, of the blades, what's called the microplastic coming off the blades. Those blades are made of a plastic resin, which contains all type of nasty chemicals that erodes much more greater in the salt air. You'll get that. It's something like an incredible amount of those blades flaking off and going into the sea. It is a disaster no matter how you look at it, economically and environmentally. And yet this is what the environmental class want. And Joel, the real thing is, there was a paper out the other day, and it looked at if every country went to net zero, China as well and India, which they're not going to do, but if every country went to net zero, how much warming would be avoided? If you assume that there's a control knob that you dial the CO2 and it controls, right? It's 0.07 of 1 degree Celsius.
Madness.
So you're not even, and Australia's contribution is 1/100th of that. So we're like, I think it's 0.0007 of 1 degree. That would be Australia's total contribution of going net zero.
That's why you can't explain this rationally. You can only explain this through moneyed interests and hysteria. And just whipped up groupthink and brain. There is just no rational way to explain this, given what you've just said.
Yeah,
I'll give you just one more.
Yeah, sure. No, of course.
The cost of batteries. Right now, if you're not going to have nuclear power, if you're going to do away with coal or gas, you've got to have batteries to get you through a night. Right? Now, no one has done these sums, and I think it's beyond Bowen's mathematical skills to work them out, or his comprehension. Right? I had a quick look. We've got a big, the Waratah super battery being built here in New South Wales. It's around about, I think, 1,680 megawatt hours. Right? Now, the cost they're talking about is something like $1 to $1.5 billion cost for that. Right? So that works out around about $1 billion a megawatt hour. Now, I did some sums. I discounted that back to $650,000 a megawatt hour. Now, through a winter's night, we need to average about 20,000 megawatts, right, of battery storage to replace when you've got low wind, so you've got no coal, you've got no gas, solar's gone to sleep, you've got a little bit of wind and you've got a bit of our hydro on the grid. We're still going to need an average of 20,000 megawatts between not just, from 4 p.m. in the afternoon to about 8 a.m. in the morning. So you look. I did the sums out. So over 3 days, I calculated to have a battery backup for just 3 days, and that's not enough because you've got to recharge your battery. You got to hope that you can have a great day. Right? It was $620 billion. That was the cost. Now, I've had that up on my social media. I challenge anyone to look at my maths and calculations and see where I'm wrong. I know we have fact checkers that like to look at this program.
They do.
Maybe they could see $620 billion. Look at the calculations. 3 days of backup for batteries if we get rid of our gas and we get rid of our coal off our grid.
No,
and they only last for 10 to 15 years.
Gotta
So
replace
then
it.
you've got to go and spend that money again
Yeah.
every 10 to 15 years. It will send the country broke.
Yeah.
And yet this is the alternative. If you're against nuclear, you have to be pro big batteries. And at that cost, and then we saw that battery fire the other day.
Yeah.
Who'd want to have a battery, a lithium-ion battery factory in your suburb?
Yeah, literally.
And the thing is that there is really no strong popular mandate for any of this. Australians, generally speaking, don't rate the climate or energy transition highly in their list of priorities. They rate energy prices highly, but this is not coming from the people. That's the other thing with this. Again, it's being imposed on the people by people whose faces we wouldn't even recognise if we ran into them in the street. We don't even know who's pushing this. A lot of the time we don't know where a lot of the money is coming from for the lobby groups, because environmental lobby groups under the Australian Electoral Commission laws don't have to disclose their funders. So we're pretty sure a lot of it's coming from overseas. Exactly where, we don't know. But again, Australians don't care about this. So what is driving it? It is not a popular mandate. Again, it is basically global moneyed interests, and the ordinary Australian is having to pay the massive price of it.
I might disagree with you slightly there. You've had all those teal candidates elected, and they're elected purely on the basis of they're going to save the climate. They're taking real action on climate change, right? Which is a complete nonsense, a complete lie, right? But they've been elected on that platform. Now, I think I think you're right. If we had a proper debate on this, like we did something like The Voice, and we put the facts and the data on the table, and we could hear from both sides of the equation, the pro-renewables lobby would get slaughtered, absolutely slaughtered in a proper debate. But we can't have one. You can't have. Can you get in? Look at those figures I mentioned. Do you reckon I'm a chance of getting on the ABC and being able to discuss those?
No.
That's actually funny.
But what I will say, get those teal candidates out into the western suburbs.
That's
of
what
Sydney,
I
or
was
the
gonna
eastern
say.
Suburbs of Perth.
Yep.
They wouldn't stand a chance.
Exactly.
You're right. There is. I agree. There is a constituency for it, but that constituency is not mainstream Australia.
It's wealthy
You are right.
suburbs. It's wealthy suburbs with feel-good mums and dads who think that they're virtue signalling and want to feel good about the things that they're doing for the environment. That's basically it.
Post-materialist ideals.
Yep,
They've got everything
that's
they
it.
need, and so now they're interested in other things.
That's it.
But I will say, guys, people are starting to work out that there is a connection here. In fact, Jordan Peterson was blowing the whistle just this week. He said the bloody nature worshippers will take everything from you, not just about energy, not just about the lights. And this is the video from here now.
These bloody nature worshippers, they'll take everything from you. Do you know what the C40 consortium is?
No, I've heard of it, but I don't know enough about it.
It's a consortium of municipalities, 40 of the biggest cities in the world. They've all signed on to this. So what's their agenda? You can't even believe this is true. One short-haul flight per person every 3 years. 95% reduction in private automobile ownership. You know this idea we're going to have electric cars?
Yeah.
Everyone knows the grid can't withstand that. No meat consumption.
I know. Europe right now.
Yeah.
And everywhere we go, it feels like people are evangelizing veganism to us.
Yeah. Finally, 3 items of clothing a year. That's their plan.
No.
Absolutely. How much
City
bloody
of Sydney.
clothing do you need? The planet's at stake. And you need to drive? What makes you so special? What puts you above the rats and the weeds? Exactly.
Stay home, watch porn, and get Uber Eats from the electric car and just shut up, maybe.
Yeah. Well, you get Uber Eats. What are you going to get? You're roasted what?
Mushrooms?
Soy. So you can grow breasts as a man.
He's off the chain.
Awesome.
He's angry.
City of Sydney is part of that, by the
I love
way.
that, man.
Clover Moore.
Yeah.
So she signed up to that, which is very fascinating for all those feel-good City of Sydneyites who may never drive again and eat crickets.
Yep.
It is, like we said earlier, it is about controlling every aspect of your life. What you spend, what you buy, how far you can travel, what kind of car that you're allowed to buy. It is just all consuming, this green ideology. It is a form of the definition of totalitarianism is a state or an institution that reaches into every aspect of your life. There is no private sphere anymore. This is a totalitarian ideology. When they start talking about a carbon wallet, how many carbon credits you get, whether you can fly or not, how far you can travel, which will have some impact on, for example, where you can send your kids to school, where you can holiday, that kind of thing. That is a totalitarian ideology. And of course, those who have enough money don't care about any of this because they'll always be able to buy carbon offsets. So they'll be able to say, well, I do want to take a fifth trip on a jet this year, but that's okay. I'll just throw a $20,000 carbon offsets and do my bit. So pay my indulgence and go do what I want. So it won't really affect the rich. It'll just affect the middle classes and lower.
Yeah, I think Craig's right. We need more direct democracy on this stuff because they would lose this debate.
They would totally lose it.
And Nigel Farage, as a part of the reform contract, not manifesto, contract with the people they made, they said we will make it much easier for the public to get up referendums. I think we should be doing 10 referendums every election that we do in Australia. I really do.
Instead of wasting money on those turbines outside of Wollongong, we should be having referendums. People should have a say in how our country is led because we don't have enough of a say. I mean, the next thing we're going to have cameras in every single household with them telling us what we can and cannot eat in our own fridges.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the next thing.
And here's the thing, that the response will always be, the problems are too complicated. You need expert understanding. It can't be left to the demos.
Like Bowen.
That's right. Yeah, it can't be left to the people. And this is the thing with the hyper scientific age we're in. See, once upon a time, a politician would say the people have spoken. They don't say that anymore. They say the science is in. The experts have said.
Because of the silent majority.
Wow.
And this is the thing. The day this changes is when the silent majority stops being silent.
Well, the big test will be this coming election.
Yeah.
In those electorates off Hunter Valley, off Port Stephens there, and down the south coast.
Yeah.
The only way these things are going to be stopped is if enough people in those electorates that have been former Labor and Greens voters look at the data and say, this is a complete nonsense. This is going to wreck our local environment and it will actually damage the economy and change their vote.
Yes.
That is the only thing that's going to stop this.
Because it's not an abstract thing anymore. It's not about some abstract notion of the climate or sustainability, abstract concept. It is directly affecting their lives. They have to see these eyesores. They see the dead wildlife. They leak oil as well. These things are full of oil. They leak oil. They turn beautiful, lush green areas into concrete because they've got to often put roads in before they can actually build the things. So for those who are living with it, it is not just an abstract concept. It is something that is actually tangibly destroying their communities. And maybe that's the only way that some people are going to learn that this is a really, really bad idea. And we just need to have a conservative media, guys like you, Joel. I mean, you might not like being called a conservative media.
I love it.
Okay, fine.
Loud and proud.
But we just got, the question is always, what can we do? All right, show where the disasters are and put it out there to the Australians. Because you know something, everything was against us with The Voice. The corporations were against us, the politicians were against us, the academics, the high schools were against us, everyone was against us. But guys like you, other people in the alternative media just got the message out there, very matter-of-fact logic out there, and it was a landslide.
And that's it. It's the silent majority was vocal, and we really need to start speaking out and telling people what our thoughts are and telling people the information. We've been silent for way too long. We need to, I mean, it's really a silly thing to say, but almost use the left's tactics to do what they do best and maybe take lessons because we haven't really learned.
Let me give you an example of one thing we're up against. I was driving up to Queensland the other week and I'm flicking around on the radio and I'm pressing, and they said Dr. Adi Patterson was coming on soon. Now, Dr. Adi Patterson was the chief executive of ANSTO. He ran the facility, the Lucas Heights nuclear reactor, which was in my old electorate. So I got to know him very well. He said he's one of the smartest guys that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting with. He'd regularly invite me around down there and he'd educate me and explain things to me. And just a top guy in his field. Right? Now, he did this interview with the ABC, and he absolutely slaughtered the person that was doing the interview.
Yeah.
And he debunked every single leftist talking point about nuclear power and renewables, and did it with, like, a clarity, facts, science, and data, right? I thought, wow, that is a really great interview. So I'm going to go and get that, and I'm going to put that on my social media pages. So
absolutely. I'll try and get him in, yeah.
So a couple of days later, I went looking for this ABC interview. Couldn't find it. Disappeared. Straight down the memory hole. So the ABC didn't want anyone, those type of interviews, they almost always put them up on their websites and their social media platforms. And here we have a debate about nuclear, which is the number one issue in the country, not only this week, but next month and going into the election campaign. So it should be given absolute priority to put that up on their platforms. And they sent it down the memory hole. They censored that interview, and that's the $1 billion ABC.
And what's the viewership of the ABC and the listening capacity of the ABC? People are turning away from mainstream media for exactly that reason, because they realise that whatever it is that they're trying to put out there is not a balanced view.
Absolutely,
That was an incredible interview. I found that on your X and I watched. That's one of the best interviews I've ever seen. It's a model of logic, just empirical detail, calm, reasoned argument. It's one of the most important interviews probably the ABC has hosted in 10 years.
I agree.
Like, it should have been sort of at the front of their website if they cared anything about a substantial public debate. Why has this guy not been a regular on Q&A on the ABC? Like, why have we
you're
not heard?
joking with
this
that
guy
question.
should be famous, but he's not.
No.
And what do? They'll get some third-rate comedian
right,
who
you're
can
right.
only get state-subsidised laughs from the ABC talking about the environment. Or they'll get them on Q&A.
Yeah, they would never. He's the guy that they would never get on.
They couldn't,
because they know that he speaks with authority and expertise in the field, and they don't want that. They want it's all about the vibe.
That's
yeah.
right.
Well, look, it kind of reminds me of during 2021 when, Craig, you were appearing on Sky News and they weren't uploading your segments to their YouTube. Okay, they didn't want to get censored. They wanted to protect their revenue. Understandable. I do that now. But then they didn't upload it anywhere. And it's like, at least I upload this full show. I take the censored stuff out and I put it on Rumble. I put it on X. I put it on, Telegram. And this is the thing, guys, and this brings me to my point. If you like this content, be sure to share it, get it out there. Be sure to donate to the show, because these shows, they last only off your donations and that of our sponsors, and there aren't many. So please share it out there, get it out there. For the 60 of you that are listening live, God bless you, because normally the streams are like that with regards to the audience attention. You guys have just been stable and fluctuating along. Thank you so much. Keep sharing the stream out. Just so you know, with regards to the numbers, it's not just 60 people that view it every week, I assure you. It's actually 400,000 to 500,000 that view it across the clips after we finish up. The first episode got 450,000 views with Craig, Natalie and Topher, and the second episode got 550,000 views, which I'm tracking. We're across a number of different platforms. This is a new YouTube a channel rather, which is why such a small viewing tonight. But this is going to grow over time, and half of the following is off nukable platforms. We're on X, we're on Telegram, Rumble. But looking at this Friday, we're doing our very first live stream of Donald Trump debating Joe Biden for the debate, for the US election. He is set to actually announce who his vice president candidate is. And he says that the person will be present. Also, Vivek Ramaswamy will be present. So a lot of people are obviously speculating, look, it looks like Vivek might actually be the guy.
Wow.
And I'm all for it. I think Vivek's phenomenal. I didn't expect him to be a second in command sort of guy, but he is a pretty good hype guy. But Donald Trump's also joined TikTok, and this guy, it's been popping off. This is one of the videos he uploaded recently, over 3 million likes, not including the millions of views.
I love no tax on tips. By the way, no tax on tips. I'm going to save TikTok.
That young kid was actually, there was more to that video. That young kid was quite incredible. He was so touched that he got to meet Trump, that he had tears. He was actually crying. And Trump, I think, he signed, was it $1 note? $1 note and gave it to him. It was really quite touching.
I think what's interesting is the issue about Vivek. And normally where you see the vice presidential, the running mate is normally someone that's, a bit, sort of like vanilla.
Yes.
I want to say the word that's, it's very...
A bit Mike Pence.
Yeah, a bit laid back sort of thing that is not necessarily a great public speaker, that gets out there and is just a real sort of more steady, sort of safe pair of hands. It's not controversial.
Yeah.
Have someone like Vivek, look, that guy has a tremendous ability to communicate, a great public speaker, a great debater, someone that's been very successful, and I would love to see him to be the Vice President of the USA, because that would also put him in position in the subsequent election to then be the President of America.
I love Vivek. I think it would be a mistake for him to make him VP, because I think you're dealing with two huge personalities.
Yep.
I think they'd have a real hard time working with one another unless Vivek basically submitted on everything and sort of just kind of just went along with the flow. Yeah. If you were to ask me who the ideal VP would be, but he's not necessarily the ideal president, Ben Carson.
But
I don't necessarily agree that it will be Vivek. Just because he's going to be there does not mean that he will be selected the vice president. I actually, sorry to disagree with you all, I don't think it will be Vivek.
Yeah, but you know what? Tune in this Friday, guys. You're going to see it. Craig will be here, and we'll find out live together, because you need a cable channel in order to actually watch the CNN debate. But
I'd be shocked if it was Vivek.
Carson would be good, but I think from a perspective of someone, a citizen of the globe, I want someone there with the strength that can say, "Hey, Don, mate, I think you're wrong." Right? I don't agree with you on that. Let's rethink about it. I think that would be good, rather than someone that's just there as a rubber stamp.
I see what you're saying, but I think also anyone who, look, I don't want to say anyone, but I think a lot of people instinctively would predict that anyone who would say to Donald, "You're doing the wrong thing," that's just not going to work with Donald Trump. That's just not how a guy like that gets to where he is in life. And that's why I see Ben Carson as probably the best. He is totally non-controversial. Do I think he'd be a great president? No. I think he's a bit goofy. There's something weird about it. He's obviously super intelligent. He's like a neuro brain surgeon or something, but he always comes across as kind of goofy. But I think he'd actually be the perfect sort of vanilla, maybe
you want.
Yeah, but also there's not a good track record.
Vanilla,
but there's not a good track record of VPs actually going on to become president.
Yeah,
no.
I will just say that sometimes it actually nukes it. Like it wouldn't work. I think you'd agree if Ron DeSantis was VP, it wouldn't have worked.
Biden was vice president.
Yeah, that's an example. Yeah. But I reckon if Ron DeSantis was the VP, I think that's another thing. It would be less likely, in my opinion, that he'd go on to become president. Trump's just not that kind of guy. I think Vivek's a good hype guy surrogate.
Yes.
He's good at hitting the online podcast.
I think he's still green.
Yes, you're right.
He's still green. He's got a lot. He's very young. He's got a fair way to go. I just don't think it'll be him.
There were no votes in him. That's the thing.
I don't know. There's a decent size Asian community. His Indian background. There's a decent size. And I think not that should count at all. I just think I look at the guy and I see someone that's extremely intelligent, that thinks about issues. And
I love him.
And if look, in my office, I used to have you sign like argue with me. I know Trump does his way of Trump has his way of doing things, and he has his public persona, right? But he really wants what is best for America and best for Australia and the rest of the world is you want someone in there that is going to put alternative suggestions to Trump. And argue, and even if Trump disagrees with what Vivek says, it makes him think about it from a different perspective.
Yeah, you're right.
So I want someone in that VP position that is going to be there and be a strong personality, that they don't go around and argue publicly, and I think Vivek's smart enough not to do that. But when you close the doors and when you have a meeting, that you've got someone there that can actually look at it from another perspective.
Well, we'll find out this Friday, guys. I do want to get through. It's almost 9 o'clock, believe it or not. Barack Obama, regardless, is getting very anxious about Biden actually losing to Trump. And obviously, who knows what kind of skeletons are in the closet that we don't know about, that Trump's going to uncover when he's there. But supposedly he's actually involving himself more in the campaign, Breitbart is reporting.
Someone's got to hold him up.
Yeah, well, yeah. Look, I think it was Obama who said, don't underestimate Biden's ability to F things up. And he said...
and he's doing a brilliant job.
He's doing a brilliant job.
Yeah,
and also, I do believe he said to Biden, you don't have to do this. You don't have to run at the time, in the election. But this other revelation which came out, Kash Patel, he dropped a huge bomb, being that Paul Ryan, who was the leader of the House of Representatives, the lower house in America, actually was the first one to receive a copy of the Steele dossier. What the hell is a Steele dossier? You might remember what kicked off this whole Russiagate, Trump, Russia, and Putin in 2016, that Putin helped Trump get elected. The Steele dossier was a document, a hit job, funded with Democratic Party donations, and it actually went on to actually target Trump. And it was completely fabricated, complete crap. And the intelligence agencies were highlighted in it. Well, Paul Ryan was a Republican. He's a rhino. And he was the first one to actually receive it. And he tried to cover it up, but it's just come out 2024. This is 8 years ago, these events.
And didn't he hire the actual investigators? So he was the Speaker of the House, and then he actually hired the investigators to investigate this, knowing full well what was in it. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Matt Kean in a way.
Oh, yeah.
Like that, you got, but seriously, you got this fifth column. You got this fifth column. No wonder Peter Dutton can't speak with conviction, because he's got to take into consideration this broad church of people stabbing in the back, and that's why I feel for him. But at the end of the day, he's still falling short of the mark, and respectfully, I'll be voting minor right parties. Sorry guys, I am conscious of time. Did you guys have any thoughts on that particular story?
Oh my gosh, yes. I have a lot of thoughts. As much as we do have very full jails and jail cells, you're talking about the next...
Let me play the source first. Okay, so this particular story, this is about jails meeting virtual reality. Let me know what you think. This is, guys, you can find this on my Twitter. I've retweeted it. This is on my X account. This is a 5-minute long video. I will not play the full thing, but I'll show you the first 60 seconds. You'll get the gist.
Prisons.
Nope.
Welcome to Cognify, a facility designed to treat criminals like patients. Instead of spending years... Welcome to Cognify, a facility designed to treat criminals like patients. Instead of spending years in an actual prison cell, prisoners could finish their sentence here in just a few minutes. Cognify could someday create and implant artificial memories directly into the prisoner's brain. These complex, vivid, and lifelike memories are created in real time using AI-generated content. Depending on the seriousness of the subject's crime and their sentence, the memories could be tailored to the rehabilitation needs of each subject. The artificial memories implanted by Cognify would be seamlessly incorporated into the existing neural networks of the brain, preventing cognitive dissonance and ensuring the subject experiences the memories as if they were real. The Cognify concept offers a new approach to criminal rehabilitation, transforming how society deals with offenders by focusing on rehabilitation rather than punishment. First, the prisoner is given a choice, either spending tens of years in a prison cell or seeking fast-track rehabilitation through artificial memory implantation. If the prisoner chooses to undergo fast-track rehabilitation, the Cognify device is used. Next, the prisoner undergoes high-resolution brain scanning to create a detailed map of their neural pathways. This brain map helps guide the Cognify...
Anyway, guys, essentially...
Where's Neo? This is the Matrix all over.
Shocking.
Like, it even looks like the Matrix.
So the idea of it goes on to basically say, I'll hear from you guys in a sec, but it basically goes on to say that this actually implants the memory of even the feeling and action of you being the victim of what you had done. So like if you killed someone, it's like they put you in it, so you actually experience it. And so it's trying to fast track the lessons basically. Stephen, what do you...
Well, I mean, this is not the Matrix, this is Total Recall. This is that Schwarzenegger film where you can take a virtual holiday. They implant a holiday chip into your brain, giving you all memories of a holiday that you've taken. This is what Yuval Harari brags about to the World Economic Forum, about, sooner or later we're going to be able to hack into the human brain. And he's absolutely right. With nanotechnology and all sorts of advances in biotechnology and a whole philosophy backing it called transhumanism, which is premised on the idea that human beings can be perfected, which means that you can basically get rid of all social problems, get rid of all pain, all sorrow through technology. I've been saying this to people for years. If you want to know what the future holds, read a bit of history. Best thing actually to read is science fiction.
Absolutely. And this is seriously